Hey, Education 1010 students. For our last class period, I'm actually breaking my final lecture into two parts. I'll do my last lecture here where I have some prepared remarks, some stories that I want to share with you, some final advice, and then I'm responding to all your questions in a separate Q&A video. Then if you ask any more questions, I'll just respond to you directly via video response in Canvas. So that's how we're wrapping up. We're going to go to my last lecture, so let me swap over here. This is my last lecture, now, and I'm doing it much in the same style as Randy Pausch, who I think is brilliant. Doing a lecture, he passed away when he was 47. I'm 46. So I'm at that age where I totally get wanting to pass on something, having a legacy, being able to share the things that matter most to you, for you, my students, but also for my children. And while I haven't showed them my last lecture, I do it every semester. There is a record, they can find it if they need to in the future, and I share a lot of these same stories with them, and they're in a lot of the stories. So it's kind of fun. So like Randy Pausch, I have some childhood dreams, and let me show you a little bit of my childhood. I was a cute kid, a little blondie. Had some He-Man, had a mullet for a while. Just a really great childhood. And when I think back to my childhood, one of the first things I think about is winning the lottery. Randy talks about that a little bit in his. I feel like when it comes to where I could be put on the earth, there just wasn't a better place. We didn't have a ton of money. We didn't have a lot of things that my friends had. But I feel like I won the lottery in that I knew my parents loved each other and that they loved me. I had a stable home to come home to. I was supported in the things I tried. And growing up with love and support, you can't ask for more than that. And so I'm really grateful for my childhood and how I was raised. So I always like to, speaking about being raised, I often ask my face-to-face students, what's the best decision I ever made? And if you're like them, I'm guessing your answer would be who you married, your decision to marry your wife. And that definitely was one of my best decisions, but it's not exactly my answer. Let me illustrate what in the world is going on here. I think this, oh, look at that. I just had to click on it. Pick good friends. Let me share this story with you. Oh, that's probably why, is I needed to do the thing first, and then there'd be this big reveal that said pick good friends. Now you know what the story is going to be about. When I was in elementary school, I had a great group of friends. We hung out, and this was back in the good old days in the 80s, and every day after school, we'd run home, we'd do our chores, then we'd go to the field, and we'd play football if it was football season, baseball if it was baseball season, basketball if it was basketball season, soccer if it was soccer season. But that was like my whole childhood. It was kind of, for me at least, it was an idyllic childhood. Where I grew up, I had a group of friends. We played sports together. When we were done, we would go to 7-Eleven and we would buy baseball cards and candy, and then we'd go back to the park and we'd trade our cards, and then we'd go to somebody's house and play Nintendo till we got called home for dinner. Like, that was my childhood. As I got older, we started going further than 7-Eleven, and this is a picture of the Stars gas station. And the reason we went there is now in 5th, 6th grade, now we're sweaty boys because of puberty, and we need more beverage. So we would go to Stars where they had 19-cent soda refills in those big old cups, and so we'd get our sodas there, and that was great. Well, one day in 6th grade, I was at Stars, and my friends were acting weird, and I didn't know what was going on, but I got my drink and I left, and then later that day, one of my friends told me what was going on. He's like, the reason people were acting weird is they were shoplifting. And I didn't know. I was naive. I didn't, this has never happened before. My friends were good kids. But it kind of rocked me, and so I stopped going to the park. I stopped going to hang out with that group of friends. I didn't know what to do because I didn't want to do that myself, but I didn't want to confront them. I didn't want to hang out with them when they were doing it. So what happened is I started 7th grade, junior high, at a new school with this many friends. Like, I just was all alone. At least I felt that way. and I didn't do things with other kids, and it was really hard. Now, Warren Buffett said, it's better to hang out with people better than you, pick out associates whose behavior is better than yours, and you'll drift in that direction. My problem was I was so shy, I didn't know how to meet people. And so I went to my mom, and I asked her what to do, and she said, you meet people by doing things. And if you do good things, you'll meet good people. And so she encouraged me to join the service clubs and to try new extracurriculars. So I went out for the choir, and I tried tennis and cross country, things that I'd never done before. And so I kind of reinvented myself in junior high, and by high school, I was then hanging out with really cool people because of these extracurriculars that I did. So it's not that I necessarily picked friends, I didn't know who I would meet, but I started doing good things. Jim Rohn says you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And again, I met these people through tennis, other sports, choir, cross country, and they're great people. These are my actual high school friends. They're such a good influence on me, and they're all high achievers and good family men, and they're just good guys. And I still associate with all of them. I see them from time to time. And it's just great to have those associations. So going back, let me flip back a few slides. What's the best decision I ever made? It was to make good friends, to pick good friends. And the way I picked good friends was being involved in good things. Now, when you're overwhelmed, like you are right now as students, and you have all these different demands on your time, it's hard to find good things to do. It's worth the sacrifice to associate with good people. Now, my best friends today, of course, I do need to throw my wife in there because she's my best friend, right? And if we're the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with, I'm glad that she's one of the 5. The other 4 are right there, and they make me better. I love my kids, and I spend as much time with them as I can. I feel like I'm a pretty good dad, but I want to be better, and they make me better because they're so wonderful. I just love, and you see their personality, just like my family growing up. We have so much fun together. Now, I want to transition into this lesson. We don't talk about this enough in school, and I certainly never heard this idea growing up, that we should do a bunch of things and fail at a bunch of things, right? But the truth is, if you want to get good at stuff, you have to try a lot of different things. And sometimes you have to try and fail, and you go through the cycle over and over of trying and failing. And eventually you're going to find something, and it's either going to work, or you're going to try something new, and that thing's going to work. And I think it's so important that we do that with school, with our extracurriculars, with our job exploration. It's important that we try a lot of different things. Now, I believe in being a content creator, as well as other kinds of creators. I think the greatest thing that you can aspire to in life is to create, right? And I'm biased here, but my best creation, I just showed you a slide of it a little while ago. There's my best creation. I have 4 of them. And I think that's the greatest contribution I'll ever make to this world, is that creation, those creations. But we can create other things too, and I think this matters especially if we're thinking about being teachers, because there's a lot of opportunities to create, whether it's curriculum or activities, lesson plans, different things that we utilize in our classroom. I am a content creator, so I'm a little biased here, but thinking about to that cycle of try, fail, I was thinking about some of the things I've tried. I've published a lot of books. So I have some coloring books that I did with my kids. I have this book about doing product reviews. And then I wrote Unlocking the Power of Transformation and haven't published it yet. I've started Dancing in the Classroom, haven't finished it yet. I have some journals. I published this one on contacting college coaches. When we look at some of these YouTube channels, I've done a lot of YouTube channels. One of them super successful. One of them's kind of successful, and the rest are like total failures. So when we look across all of these, most of the things that I've done have failed, at least according to the world's definition of success. But by doing them, I've developed skills. I've found other ways of trying similar things, and those things have worked. And so, again, with this cycle of try, fail, eventually you're going to find the things that work. And for me, I've talked a little bit about my side hustles, but I make a lot more money by not being a teacher than I do as a teacher, and it's because I've tried a lot of things, and some of those things are semi-passive, and so I continue to have money coming in. And I just think that's because I'm consistent. I try and I fail, I try and I fail. All right, now I want to move into moments. As a researcher, I study teacher retention, and there are a lot of things that teachers can't control. Teachers leave the profession because they're overworked, underpaid, underappreciated. As a teacher, there's very little we can do about teacher pay. We can do the best job we can and hope that the powers that be decide to increase teacher pay. That's unfortunate that that's the world we live in, but it's the reality. What we can do is have more fun and enjoy being teachers, and that's going to help with teacher retention. So if we want to feel appreciated and feel valued, we have to have moments in the classroom. And the reason I have these different sodas up here is I think back to my 5th grade class. I had Mr. Hodgson, and he incentivized us. And actually the research on these kind of extrinsic motivators says that they're usually bad, because when you don't have that motivator anymore, it's taken away, then you lose all incentive to do it and you quit doing that thing. But in this case, he would say, if you read enough books, we'll have a party and you can earn points and then you can earn sodas. And we didn't have soda in my house growing up, and I really wanted some, so I read a lot of books. And then the party came, and I remember the first time I earned a 2-liter soda. It was a big deal. This was 5th grade. And I took it home, and I'm a jerk. And I took that 2-liter, and I chugged it, and I drank it in front of my brother, and I didn't share any of it. And it was so amazing for me to work hard towards something, and then for a teacher to create this moment for me in the classroom. Mainly inspired by that, I do auctions in my face-to-face classroom. So even at college, I have my students earn up points during the semester. We bid on things. This was in a 5th grade classroom, some of the things I gave. But as a product reviewer, I get tons of extra stuff all the time. And so I love to give it away to my students and create these classroom parties. And today, in my face-to-face classes, we had our end of the semester party. And I look forward to that for weeks, even months. And it helps me enjoy what I'm doing as a teacher because I have that moment. But even better than the moments that are great for me is creating moments for your students. Let me illustrate this with a few things. After COVID, our school had stopped doing field trips. And so I wrote a grant and I got money. And I took the 5th grade on our first post-COVID field trip. And it was just to go hiking. But we hadn't done anything like that in years. It'd been several years. And it was so fun to get out and to see my students just appreciate so much doing something different. It was a moment that I certainly remember, and I think my students remember. Another time in 5th grade, we read this book series. We'd finished reading all the ones we needed to read for the year, and I read extra books with my students. We did a lot of story time. And so we read this book, Michael Vey, by Richard Paul Evans. And I worked really hard. It took several emails and phone calls, but at the end of the school year, we met with Richard Paul Evans, the author of the book, and we did a video conference with him. It was his first day back from spending time in Brazil researching for his next book. And so he told us we were the first people in the whole world to hear about the next book in the series. And he called us from his ranch, which is a place in the actual book. And it was so fun having that conversation, and my students who had just read his book were so excited. And we invited a few students from other classes to join us, so our room was packed. And it was just so fun to get on this Zoom call for, less than an hour. But just to have our whole class, you can kind of see them there, all crowded into the camera so he could see them. It was so fun, and a moment for many of my students who were really invested in reading. I also had a great moment. I had a student who went through a hardship with his family. And because of my contacts as a sports writer, I reached out to the BYU football team to see if they could help out. And the whole family went up. They have 10 kids. And they went up and toured the facilities, went to a practice, met all the players, got a bunch of swag. And I wasn't even there. So this was something that was a moment for my student that I helped orchestrate, but I wasn't even involved. I wasn't invited. I would have liked to have been there, but they didn't invite me. But they were able to have a special moment, and it certainly made a difference for my student in that class, just being able to have that experience. Other moments that I've appreciated, anytime my students wrote enough, I would help them publish their books. And so seeing kids just be so excited to write and to come up with things. This was a fun book because he also illustrated it and did some multimedia. It was really fun to help him edit everything he did and then submit it for publication. And so this was a really cool experience. And the reason I bring this up for moments is these were moments that I created for my students, but these are my highlights from my teaching career. So you ask, what are the best things that I've experienced as a teacher? It's seeing my students have these incredible experiences and moments. And I just so enjoy that as a teacher. Related to moments, I've been thought a lot about this over the years. The difference between acquiring things and acquiring experiences. And when you can pick a thing or experience, I say pick the experience. The reason I illustrated with these two things here is I'm a world traveler. I love to go to different places, and this is a picture from Hong Kong. I had a great trip there a while ago. And this is a picture of a TV in the 90s. And I remember when I was in the 90s and we didn't have a lot of money, and I saw a TV like this. It's like 48 inches, weighs hundreds and hundreds of pounds, and they cost thousands of dollars. And today, you would have to pay someone to take that TV out of your house because it's such a dead space and it's not useful. So after decades, it loses its value. Whereas with experiences, I went to Hong Kong many, many years ago, and I still think about it all the time, and I learned so much from my experience being there and being in a different culture and being there with people who did speak the language, who were able to show me the non-touristy side of Hong Kong. That was a great experience, and I'll never lose that. But I think about this big screen TV, and if, as a young teenager, if I took the thousands of dollars that this would have cost and I invested it in the stock market and got a normal rate of return over the next several decades, let's say 10%, then by the time I retire or am at retirement age in my 60s, that same amount of money would be worth like at least $250,000. And so sometimes it's worth it to delay gratification on things that we can get for temporary pleasure, for things that we can have in the future. And I've certainly seen that now, where a lot of my investments are coming to fruition and compounding for me in a big way right now. And they afford me the opportunity to have more experiences. And I loved this last year. I went to Hawaii for the first time, went to Peru for the first time, rented a boat at Bear Lake for the first time. And I'm having these experiences with my kids while I have them, because I have a bunch of teenagers right now, and I want to take advantage of that. But we have the money because we saved it instead of buying the big screen TV in the past. And I still buy all my clothes from Deseret Industries. And, we scrimp on certain things so we can have experiences. So I just wanted to put that plug in there, because you're at a time in your life right now where you can start deciding, do I want to buy that thing or do I want to save? And saving really pays off because it allows you to have experiences. I want to talk a little bit about doing hard things. If you're considering becoming a teacher, you're going to work hard all your life. And the best teachers are consistent. And so I want to talk a little bit about consistency. My favorite example of this is a runner. His name is Glenn Cunningham. And he was a child in the early 1900s. He lived in Kansas and would go to a schoolhouse in the morning with his family. And he would go early to stoke the fire and make a little extra money. Well, one day they went early, and he and his brother were there to start the fire, and they lit the kerosene stove, or they lit a match and put it in the stove, and someone had left kerosene in there. The stove exploded, and it killed his brother, and Glenn got burns all over his whole body. Well, he's in the hospital for a long time, and while he's there, the doctors say, he might walk again, but it's going to take a lot of work and calisthenics. And Glenn heard that, and he was determined he was going to walk again. And fortunately, he also had a really supportive family. When he came home from the hospital months later, his dad had built a railing around their farmyard so that he could pull up on it and practice standing up. And so he'd take his wheelchair out, and he would stand up, and eventually he took a step and then more steps. And before too long, he was running, and he found he was great at running. In fact, he won his very first race as a ninth grader, and then proceeded to become one of the greatest high school runners of all time. And while he's in high school, there's no such thing as scholarships, but he wanted to run in college and was looking at the Olympics. And so he had to save his money, so he worked for all the nearby farms. And this was right as the Great Depression was approaching, and people didn't have money and they couldn't pay him back. And so he would work, but he wouldn't get paid for it. And they said, we'll pay you back in the future and we'll give you interest. So he does all this, does end up going to one of the top schools, certainly in his area, and goes to Kansas, where he's an All-American and a great runner, and breaks the world record in the 1,500 meters, the fastest man alive, at least for a period of time. And while he's in college, this is before he goes to the Olympics, while he was still in college, he goes to the Penn Relays, which is the biggest, most prestigious track meet in the country at Madison Square Garden in New York. And a reporter approached him after he won his race and said, you know, and this is why I have this picture up here, is she said, you always look really serious, stoic, deadpan when you run. Why do you always have that same expression? And he said, if people understood what I was feeling, and if I looked the way that I felt when I ran, no one could stand to look at me, because I'm in such agony. And what the whole world didn't know up to this point was, because of the injuries sustained in the fire, because of the burns all over his body, he had a condition where he was in constant pain. He felt like there were pins going up through his feet all the time. Every time he put his foot down, it hurt. And he was running through constant pain, and he just learned how to work through the pain. Well, this is a very personal story to me, because I have a similar condition where my feet always experience pain, and I haven't been able to find a diagnosis despite meeting with over a dozen doctors, and I just live in pain now. And so I can appreciate how difficult it was. I run less now because of this condition. He just sucked it up and just worked through the pain, became an Olympian, and did great things. And that's the Hollywood version of the story. And I'm actually writing a book about this, and hopefully we'll adapt it one day to make a movie. But that's the Hollywood version. What Hollywood doesn't share is the second half of his life, which is, in my opinion, even cooler. So after the Olympics, he competes in 2 Olympics, and then he retires from running, goes back to school, gets a PhD, and becomes a professor. And he hates it. So that's the bad part of the story. I love being a professor. He did not. So what he did is, now people are starting to pay him back. He's famous. He's a celebrity, at least in his small town. And people didn't want to owe him one anymore, so everyone pays him back, and he has all this money that he goes ahead and buys a huge horse ranch. Now, again, this was a long time ago. This was in the 40s, and so there was no such thing as retirement. But he buys this horse ranch with the idea that I'll work the land, I'll sell horses, and I can do that till I die. So that's his new job. They have 8 kids. They're busy on the horse ranch with hundreds of horses. And then somebody approaches them and asks, hey, we have this troubled teenager getting into trouble in school, really struggling with different things. Can we send him to your ranch over the summer, and he'll just help you out on the ranch? We think that it would be good for him to work. And so the Cunninghams graciously accept and take this kid onto their property, and over the summer give him a place to live, feed him, and put him to work, working with the horses. And he was really, he turned things around and did really well. He was put in a new environment. As teachers, often that's all it takes, is getting our students in a new environment. And by the end of the summer, he was making some really good decisions and had turned some things around in his life. And I don't know how this works, but in one of the accounts I read, it says that they gave him a horse. I don't know how you do that. Like, here, have a horse. Put it in your pocket, take it home with. I don't know how you do that, but he got a horse out of the deal too. Anyhow, word spread that Cunninghams are good at working with troubled teens, and so now more requests come in. Hey, can you take this person over the summer? Can you take this person over the summer? And this is what I love so much about the Glenn Cunningham story, is he didn't do one hard thing, run, and then coast for the rest of his life and live off his celebrity. He didn't do another hard thing and get a PhD and become a professor and then just settle into an easy life. He continued to work hard and take on hard things. And over the next 30 years, they had hundreds of kids come stay on their ranch and had kind of a pseudo summer school where they would teach them skills and have them work with the horses. And they changed hundreds of lives this way. And he did this until his death. And I just feel like that's such an amazing and inspiring story of somebody who didn't just do one hard thing, but once they finished that one hard thing, moved on to the next hard thing and the next hard thing and the next hard thing. I think there's a great lesson there. Speaking of hard things, not everything is going to go our way. And I like to share this story. This is one of my failures in life. I have a lot of failures. I like that cycle of the try, fail, try, fail, try, fail. And I am persistent. But in Randy Pausch's last lecture, he talks about how sometimes brick walls are there to see how badly we want something. Well, when I was a student back 25 years ago, I went on a church mission, and when I came home, I went to this place called the Mission Training Center. When I give this last lecture, when I lived in Wisconsin and Indiana and Connecticut, no one knew what this was, but a lot of you guys have some concept of what the training center is. You go there to prepare to go on your church mission. And for me, the big challenge was to learn Spanish. So I learned Spanish as a missionary, and when I came home, I wanted to teach Spanish. That was my big goal. And it just so happened that the training center was across the street from the university I attended, and it was a good job. It was a high-paying job. It felt prestigious, like good kids would get those jobs teaching Spanish at the training center. And so I really wanted this job. So I applied, and I went through an interview. It was all in Spanish. It was kind of scary. But I felt good about my chances. I had learned a lot of Spanish on my mission. And I got a letter 2 weeks later in the mail. I opened it up. I'm so excited. And it said, "We're sorry to inform you that we had a lot of qualified applicants and you didn't get the job." But then there was a silver lining, and I loved this. It said, "In 6 more months, you can apply again." So, and they recommended that I try to keep up with my Spanish and then I could try again. So I decided I really wanted this job. I had this brick wall in front of me. I was like, how am I going to get over this and get this dream job? And at that time, I was thinking maybe I'll even be a high school Spanish teacher or high school choir director. I wanted to get teaching experience. And so 6 months later, and now I've taken another Spanish class in college. I got a job. I wanted to get my foot in the door, so I got a job as a janitor at the training center, where I got to wake up early in the morning and go vacuum. So I at least had a foot in the door. And then 6 months later, I interviewed again and waited 2 weeks, and then I got my letter, and it said, "Sorry, there were a lot of qualified candidates, but you can apply again in 6 months." So then I took another Spanish class, and over the summer, I got a job working at a summer camp called EFY, where I got to teach and work with kids. And it was a great experience. And now I'm better prepared, and I have a better resume, and my Spanish is better. So I apply again, and I got my, what are we at now, 3rd rejection letter. So then I keep working hard, and I get promoted. I'm no longer working at the training center as a janitor. I got a job working as a secretary for a professor. So a great job, and I'm learning a lot, and I'm adding value. And then I apply again, I get rejected again. Over the summer, I get promoted at my summer job. So now I'm not just a counselor, but I'm one of the administrators, and I get to fly all over the country and set up camps on different university campuses, and a great experience. And at my job back at the university as a secretary, I get promoted to be the secretary for the whole department and work with a lot of professors. And then I apply again, and I get rejected. And now it's getting embarrassing for me because all my roommates are teachers there, and some of them are even like the supervisors that hire. And I'm like, what's wrong with me? I'm never getting this job. So my whole time as an undergrad, I applied 6 times. I got 6 rejection letters. I never got hired for my dream job. And I thought, I really wanted it, and I did everything in my power to get this job. And Randy Pausch says the brick walls are there to let us know, or to see how badly we want something. But sometimes I think they're also there to show us that there's other opportunities. There's other things we can do. Because now I can look back and I'm so grateful. I never got a job at the training center. because through my other work experience, I made connections that led to graduate school, that led to me becoming a professor, that put me on the career path that for me is probably a much better fit than what I would have pursued had I got hired for this job. I wanted it for kind of the prestige and the glory and the money. It was a higher paying job. But what I got instead was a much better career path for me and greater opportunities. And so sometimes those obstacles are there just to help us out and to help us see that there's another way. Just got a few last thoughts that I want to share with you. I love this concept of an Eeyore and a Tigger. Randy Pausch talks about that, but I want to talk about it in the context of being a teacher. We've all had teachers that are Eeyores. They complain about everything, they whine, they're negative, and it's infectious. It rubs off on the students, and it's not a fun place to be. We also all know Tiggers. Tiggers are enthusiastic, they're passionate, they're usually happy, but Tiggers aren't perfect. Like, they're annoying sometimes. They jump on your face. Like, Tigger literally jumps on your face. And I say, as a teacher, if we can choose, let's choose to be the Tigger. Tiggers don't have to be perfect, but if we're going to be infectious, let's have our passion and our enthusiasm and our happiness rub off on our students instead of the things that are weighing us down. And what I found is, it's not fake it till you make it. It's let's truly find the things to be happy and excited about, and our students will do likewise, and it will create a better environment in our schools. All right. I love the 90s movie, Bill and Ted's, be excellent to each other. And I say be excellent to each other even if they don't deserve it. My son taught me this lesson. We had some neighbors that were grumpy old neighbors. We moved in, we're the new family. We try to be good neighbors. We take them cookies, we talk over the fence. But there was a day where we tried, and they just never seemed to like us, and they weren't very nice to us. And one day we saw that someone had been out walking their dog, and their dog pooped on our neighbor's turf. And I asked my kids if they would go over and just clean it up so that our elderly neighbors wouldn't have to deal with it. So they did, and they go over, and while they're there, our neighbors come out of their house, and not to thank them or to celebrate, but to yell at my kids and curse at my kids and say, keep your blankety blank dog off our property. And I heard this going on. I go out, and my kids rush home, and they're in tears. And we're furious, because here we are just trying to help out. And I turned to my wife, and my kids heard me, and I'm like, we're done. Like, we don't have to be nice to these guys anymore. We don't have to talk to them. Let's just pretend they don't exist. We'll ignore them as best we can. And that was my attitude. And my wife actually felt similar. But thank goodness for kids. Thank goodness for kids. A few days later, my son, who was probably about 10 at the time, 10, maybe 11, 5th grade, 4th grade, he approached me and he said, is it all right if I bake some cookies and take them over next door and just explain what happened? And he wanted to give him a second chance. He wanted to show some compassion and to communicate. And we reluctantly said, well, yeah, you can do it, but we're not going with you. And so he did. And he went over, and some hearts were softened. The neighbors later came and apologized to us for the miscommunication. But the interesting thing here is I always kind of held a grudge against these neighbors. I wasn't thrilled that this was their attitude. But my 10-year-old son became good friends with them. They started looking for opportunities to have him come over to help them with things that they couldn't do for themselves. So he became their yard work guy, and he helped move things in the house. And when he turned 16, they were so bummed when he bought his own car. He bought a 67 Mustang to restore. And our neighbor came over in tears, and he said, I was saving my car to give to your son. Because he had become such dear friends, and he'd helped him so much. And I just think, what a great lesson from kids here, that we can give second chances. We can show compassion. And it pays off. We don't need to be angry. We don't need to hold grudges. So that was a great lesson I learned. This isn't my story, but it's certainly a great lesson that I learned from my son. As my students would leave each day, I'd high-five them, and I'd say, work hard, do good, and be nice to your mom. And they would laugh, and they'd be like, can I be nice to my dad too? And I'd like, sure, be nice to your dad too. But I would explain to them, from time to time. I'd say, obviously, I want you to work hard. I want you to be kind. But the last thing is the most important thing, to be nice to your mom. Because while right now you think your friends are all it, and you're concerned with what clothes you wear and what games you play and how you spend your free time, in the long run, what's going to matter is your relationships. And your folks and your siblings are going to be around for a long time, and they care about you. So let's make sure that we show appreciation for them, that we write our mom thank you notes, that we comment on the good things they've done. And I realize, again, I know I won the lottery, both with my parents and with my kids and with my spouse. But my advice to my students and to you is find those people in your life that are going to be around for a long time and treat them the way you should. We should never treat our families and our close friends worse than other people. We should treat them better. We should treat them the best we can. And we should look for excuses to talk about them behind their back in positive ways and to give them as much encouragement and love and support as we can, because they're going to be around for a long time. And we know that close personal relationships are the number one indicator of long-term happiness, longevity of life, and success. So let's make sure that we're nice to our mom. All right, as we land the plane here, I just wanted to say it's not goodbye for me, it's hello neighbor. It's ta-ta for now, because some of you I'll have for other classes. I might supervise your student teaching. I might see you around the community, and I really appreciate, actually this semester, several of people have bumped into me and they said, hey, Mr. C, you don't recognize me, but I'm one of your online students, and I recognize you because you do all these videos. It was nice to meet you. I love that. So approach me, let me know who you are. I might not recognize you, and I apologize. I'm memorizing 200 new students every semester, so I cycle through a lot of students, but I do care about you, and I think about you. I wake up early in the morning. This morning I was up at 3:45 thinking, what can I do to make this last day meaningful for my students? So I hope to see you in other classes, student teaching. If there's on-campus events, I go to a lot of stuff. And especially if you invite me, if you're in something, if you're involved, if you have a recital or a sports activity, I love to come support you and stuff like that. So let me know. I'll get it on my calendar. I can't come to everything, obviously, but I love excuses to take my kids on dates or my wife on dates and come support. And if you have a life event, things you'd invite your uncle to, weddings, mission farewells, stuff like that, graduations, I want to support you when I can, and I'd love to be there if you're open to inviting me. That's part of being a teacher. I love that connection with my students. I've even had a lot of my concurrent enrollment students that invite me to their high school activities, which is really cool. I do have a presence online, so I know I've mentioned before, Creator Side Income is the channel I created for you guys where I talk about side hustles. I also have a few other channels that you can find me if you look. I've talked about Hill Academy in this class, and I have a few others. If you ever need someone to talk to, my office is 326 in the education building. Come up. My door's often closed, but just knock on the door, and I'd love to chat if you need to chat about anything. And my final bullet note here is apology. I talk a lot. I make a lot of these videos. There's a good chance that I've said something that was either misinterpreted, or maybe I said something insensitive and it was offensive to you. That's never been my intent. I love teaching, and I really do genuinely care about each of you. And if I've said something that rubbed you the wrong way, for some people it's because I get a little too personal. I talk about my kids a lot. I'm not doing it to be a jerk. That's just my style, and I hope that you'll forgive me if I've said anything that was insensitive or that didn't go over well with you. Let me know about those things, and I'll try to do better in the future. And then finally, ta-ta for now. I really do hope that we cross paths again. You can always email me. This is my personal email address. It's never changed. I've had that address for a long, long time. So you can reach out to me. And I just hope you have a great break and keep at it. You're my hope for the future, and I'm really excited about the things that you'll accomplish. All right, ta-ta for now.